and I don't want a temporary solution. I want a proper solution. Then we have to upgrade the rural clinics. I have $1 million put aside for that. Then I just mentioned we have about $15 million for next year for the housing. I'm negotiating $80 million, 30 million US from OPEC Fund and the Kuwaiti Fund for Arab Economic Development to do a program of feeder roads, village roads, and secondary roads. The feeder roads, the village roads, and secondary roads, many of them in a bad condition. No if, maybe after that. The weather has not been good. The roads had not been of a kind built which had the kind of a sub-base. So those we have to begin to put right. Whilst I'm on roads, I just want to mention, some of you would have seen on the Facebook or what other internet facility, the road at the bypass road at Argyle. There's a crack in the road. I've been in touch with Brent Bailey, the chief engineer, and I was also in touch with Minister Francis, Minister of State in the Ministry of Works. And though the diagnosis is not yet complete, it does appear that what happened when that road was built, that particular area was a gutter, a gully, and they had to be filled because you had to change the road because you built the airport. You had to change the road in any case because the seawater was taking the road. The old road around where at Argyle. So the construction which involved the problem with the filling material, and then the rain, all the rains, and the place became very waterlogged, the soil above, and that very soil itself compressed it and pushed it, and it got cracked. We will have to close that road for about 3 days for the safety of commuters. Maybe I gave the instructions today upon receiving all the reports. Maybe until Wednesday night, Thursday. What will happen is that commuters will pass through Yambu and come through Calder. If you're coming from the windward side, take the Calder road when you're going on the leeward side, or on the windward and when you're going out. Or you can drive up to the back of Calico and go up to Belmont and go across through Yambu. Because we have to, there's a piece of road, there's a near to Argyle, near to the same where it is. We have to do some bulldozing and do some surfacing for a temporary bypass, which will take us about 3 days. We have started to work on it right at the moment. So that matter is being dealt with. I want to say this. One of the amazing things in St. Vincent and overseas with some people, those who have a visceral dislike for rap, they allow that dislike to metamorphose, to change into a dislike of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So that a crack appears in the road, and there's a rejoicing. There's a rejoicing. They say, the deck of cards are falling. Men who have no knowledge of engineering, men who know absolutely nothing about how this problem has been caused. But they just want to give a bad name. And worst of all, it happened here to the airport. Some of them even saying the thing blight It's because with the trouble, the symmetry, the jump coming now. For us to laugh. But the point is this. Look, there's a problem and we're dealing with it. The fact of the matter is this. That bypass, which cost us $6 million US, we borrowed the money from the Caribbean Development Bank. And when that money was borrowed, it had an international consultant on the matter, selected by the Caribbean Development Bank. The analysis is being done at the moment as to what precisely went wrong. But the preliminary suggestion is that the filling was insufficiently compacted and that the drainage did not go, there was a surface drainage but not a drainage sufficiently deep to take into account the nature of the terrain which you had. There are other engineering things to explain to me, but I'm trying my best to put it in a simpler form as I understood it. And that it's an inconvenience, but the matter will be sorted out. It's the same problem which happened down at Clare Valley. There's absolutely no doubt that the construction of the houses at Clare Valley, an error was made in terms of the construction of a few other houses. And it was an error connected to supervision. The land is suitable for housing construction. And the study by Dr. Robertson, the geologist from St. Vincent and Grenadines, who is in Trinidad now, indicates that to be the case. But I just want to say to you the difference between government. The problem arose at Clare Valley. Immediately, having been given an oral word-of-mouth assessment by the chief engineer, I went on radio and said, the government accepts responsibility for the defects which have occurred at Clare Valley, and that the residents must be assured that the government will correct them, which is what we have been doing. And in fact, I have $3 million in the estimates for next year to complete the correction process, to make sure that more retaining walls go in, proper drainage, and make it far better than it ever conceivably would have been, even in the first case, if you had put in some of these things. But contrast that with what happened at Gibson Corner under the NDP. And I want you to remember this. It has cost us to correct Gibson Corner, which is a problem we inherited from the NDP, over $12 million thus far. That was a case where the government had a report where the report said that you must not build up at Gibson Corner in that area because the lands are slipping. It is entirely unsuitable for housing. They didn't tell the homeowners that. The homeowners bought the land, went to the bank, borrowed money, built beautiful houses, and they started to crack and run. We set up a commission of inquiry under Justice Monica Joseph. Eustace, as leader of the opposition, appeared before the commission of inquiry and gave evidence. And he said that the way he sees it is that the government has some responsibility, partial responsibility. Monica Joseph, in her findings, said he has to disagree with her. I mean, she has to disagree with him. It's not some, it's not partial. It's whole responsibility, and the government is obliged to correct the matter entirely and to pay the people for their houses up there. And then had to get lands to make sure they get lands at a reasonable price. And we are completing now the infrastructure in some areas down at Pembroke. costing us over $12 million. Up to the end, they are denying the acceptance of full responsibility. But if an error is made by anyone on your watch, the government has to accept the responsibility and do the corrective work. Because the government cannot be a bandit. The government has to act in a manner which is responsive and responsible, which is what we have done in every single case since we have been in government. And that is the measure by which we are assessing our own work as we proceed. You would have heard over the last couple of days, last week or so, that the IMF made a report on St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It came down the usual article for consultation. And the hangers-on the NDP are busy attacking the IMF and the gentleman who came and did his presentation on the economy. What did the report say? The report said that despite the loss and damage suffered in December, that the economy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has grown modestly in this year. And they predicted that next year that it would grow a little more. And that because of the airport, by 2016, they expect that the underlying positive growth will be substantially higher, in excess of 3%. I ain't say those things, as them say. I've been saying that all the time. You all hear me on that. They tell me I talk in crap. Now the IMF, now they have come, they have said it. I have said in the parliament that we have to watch our public debt, but that the debt is manageable. The IMF has said that. It's manageable, but we have to watch it. But they don't want to hear that. The NDP don't want to hear that. The fact is this, is that St. Vincent and the Grenadines, despite 5 weather events, 3 storms and 2 droughts, from 2010 to the drought in the first half of this year, which has caused damage and loss for 1/3 of our GDP, in excess of 33% of our GDP, our gross domestic product. Despite the fact that we are building the largest capital project ever in the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has, of the OECS countries, of the countries of the currency union, the smallest debt to GDP. This doesn't mean that we don't have challenges. This doesn't mean that we don't have problems. But they're manageable. And the gentleman at the press briefing said that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not in as bad a position as some of the places inside of this Caribbean. They want to crucify the man for that because, as far as they're concerned, it's the worst, because once Ralph is there, it's the worst. You know? And then, on the issue of energy, which is a critical question, and bear with me, let me speak a couple of minutes on this. They commend the government for the work we are doing with geothermal development and also with solar energy. Let me give you a snapshot as to what confronted us early this year. In December, the disaster disrupted the hydroelectricity system to the tune of nearly $20 million in damage.